And a little while on, they're like swimming along.
Like that.
Couldn't do that on the old podcast, could I?
Nope.
Probably shouldn't do it on this one.
Probably shouldn't.
No. So what people say about you is not your culture.
No.
It is an indication of your culture, and there are indications in there, and you will probably find there are tensions in there.
Hi, and welcome to the Deep Sea Dive podcast, the place where we take a dive into culture, change, communications and coaching, as well as having some really great conversation. My name's Lottie.
And I'm Lorna.
Yeah.
I think.
We were.
I am.
You were.
Definitely
I think,
Lorna.
therefore, I am.
Yes. Do
So,
any of us really know who we are?
No. Deep philosophy begins.
Yes.
So today, what we want to chat to you about is something that is obviously central to what we do, and that is the big, hairy, audacious, ubiquitous, endlessly challenging topic of organisational culture.
Yes, which when we created the concept of a deep sea dive, the C stood for culture at that point. In the pod, we'll kind of interject that with all of our other C's.
All the other C's.
All the 6 other C's, plus conversations with guests. But I gave a talk on this at the Engage conference a couple of months ago, and it was fairly well received. And I started with a few obvious, references from music, but I started by saying, we make the topic of culture really complicated.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, it is.
Well, it is, and it can be, right, but people know what it feels like to be somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think in organisations in particular, there are industries and accreditations and specialisms built around the concept of culture, understanding culture and
measuring culture.
Codifying and measuring culture.
Yeah.
And when I did my master's, for example, this was the kind of the stream of thought that I grew up in. And you work with organisational psychologists who do brilliant work. And I'm not poo-pooing, OD or organisational psychology as a discipline. What I'm saying is that for culture to be something that we can do something about, everyone in the organisation needs to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And that means that when we start using frameworks from people like Edgar Schein or Gert Hofstede or whoever else has created a lovely framework explaining culture, and we put it into the words of academia or OD.
Yeah, we gatekeep it. It's with the people team, right? The people and culture team.
Yeah, when you call them the people and culture team,
it just makes it seem like it's my responsibility. And I think what's really interesting over the past few years is how culture has risen in terms of the media. It's become such an important and often thrown away, like toxic culture, for example, right? Toxic culture is something that the media loves to talk about. And over the past few years, culture's been almost kind of taken over, and actually no one really knows what they mean when they talk about culture.
It sort of becomes
meaningless.
It means everything and nothing in a way. And it's a nice shorthand for people sort of know what we're talking about, but they actually know to be able to do something about it.
Yeah.
They don't.
We were reading a really interesting paper from the CIPD the other day, weren't we? Which was differentiating actually between what we refer to as culture and then the addition of what's called climate.
Yeah.
And I like their definition of climate as the shared experiences and the meaning made of policies, procedures and practices that employees experience.
Yeah, and the paper's one of the CIPD's evidence-based people management papers, and it looks at the evidence base underneath some of the cultural models and theories. And what they find is that there is very little evidence to support the likes of Edgar Schein or Gert Hofstede, or, there are some more 4-box grids than you can shake a stick at around culture. What there is a stronger evidence base for is work and impact around what the CIPD and the researchers call climate.
Yeah.
And you've got the definition of climate written down over there, I'm hoping.
Well, I've just given it, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, do you want me to say it again?
Yeah, because I wasn't listening, so maybe nobody else says.
Listen.
I know, I'm just too excited about the topic of culture.
It's the shared experiences of... I've said it once already. It's the shared experiences and meaning made behind policies, procedures and practices that an employee experiences.
That bears repeating.
It's how they define climate,
Yeah.
right? You know, this idea of shared perceptions and meaning made behind the policies, the practices and the
processes. No, we're good. Kept going.
But the other thing that CIPD paper talks about is the fact that and you made this point earlier, is that culture is almost so vague, it's impossible to get a handle on. We like a challenge. So how are we going to try and grapple with this big subject that we know that leaders find really important? We were in a meeting the other day with a senior leadership team who said, culture, got to be top of our list, right? We know the topic of culture matters, but what we also know is it's blimmin' hard to actually articulate and, importantly, know where to start and know what to do with. And this is where our model of culture as an ecosystem came from.
Absolutely. And I think that's the nub of it. And I think that is probably the nub of what the CIPD research is saying. Because how can you make real interventions that you can then demonstrate there's some evidence of them being successful? If you don't know where to look. And I think that's really the concept that we like to think about culture. So we do think of it as an ecosystem, which is almost culture and climate wrapped into one, right? And there are components of that ecosystem. This is deliberately not a model. It's a philosophy and it's a way of explaining culture to people who are not sitting in the people and culture team or taking, degrees on organisational behaviour, for example.
Yeah. Can I just say that I really love the way that you talk about culture as an ecosystem, right? But I love your little two fishies marine analogy.
Well, I think this analogy really brings it to life.
So do I. It's really simple.
It really brings it to life. And when I did this at the conference, it was one of those conferences where they made all of the guests wear the little headsets and you listen through your headset, which is really disconnecting. You actually don't know if your people in the audience are listening to you or if they're listening to like Spotify. They could be listening to Stephen Bartlett for all I know, So I did this little analogy and I asked them to close their eyes. The moment, the audience is listening to you is when they all close their eyes at the same time. So that was lovely. So if you close your eyes and you imagine you're in this deep blue ocean, and in this ocean, you have two young fish and they're just swimming along in the ocean, carried by the current, swimming along, bubbles coming out of their mouths, whatever fish do.
You get the idea, right? Fish. things fish do. Fish things.
This is why you were on your main stage with all your shiny guests and I was on the little stage talking about fish. So
these fishies are swimming along. Two little fishies happily swimming along.
They meet a big fish. And the big fish comes...
And they don't do big fish, little fish cardboard box, do they?
They're not ravers, babes.
No, they're not. That's me.
They're not ravers. So...
there are two little raving fish who meet a big fish in the water.
If you want, we can link to the talk on the podcast notes and you can figure out what I said the first time round.
Without me interjecting.
This big fish comes the other way and the big fish says, "Morning, fellas, how's the water?"
Yeah.
Nods at them, whatever fish do, and says, "How's the water?" And they kind of smile at him, and the way you smile at, friendly older people that you don't really want to talk to. And then they swim on. And a little while on, they're like swimming along.
Like that.
Couldn't do that on the old podcast, could I? Nope. Probably shouldn't do it on this one.
Probably shouldn't.
No. So they swim on.
Yeah.
One younger fish looks at the other younger fish and says, "The hell is water?"
Yeah.
And that's culture, right?
Yeah.
So we swim around in it all the time. We get pulled along in its currents. We get tangled up in the environment of it. We rely on it to breathe. But actually, can we name it because we're swimming along in it? And so often people swim along in the culture of their organisation without really being able to define, that's this thing that makes us behave in this way or makes us feel this way or makes these things more important than those things. Yeah. And so it's a nice metaphor for thinking about why is culture so nebulous and what do we mean by it?
Absolutely. And then what we then did is we thought, right, okay, if we're going to look at culture through the lens of kind of culture and climate, how can we provide almost a practical tool, a way to demystify, a way that people can start to get going on something? And so we looked at 5 core areas within an organisation. Right? And then we started to articulate what we mean with each of the area. And so the first area in your deep sea dive that you might want to go dipping around in, diving around in, depending how deep you want to go, is what people say you are.
Yeah,
right?
I think this is where a lot of organisations start and finish.
Yeah.
Is with the external perception or even the employer brand. You know, what do people say we are? So if we can control what people say we are, we've controlled our culture, I think is the assumption they make. I think there are consultancies and agencies out there that conflate brand with culture sometimes too. But what people say we are is both a formal and an informal construct. It's not only the label on the shop, your brand, your tone of voice in that what you're telling people and how people respond to it. It's how your customers describe you, right? And this is really your purview much more than mine, because this is pure brand thinking.
Yeah.
But it's also what your employees say about you.
Exactly.
What does the Glassdoor reviews say?
Right. What do the Glassdoor say? What are they saying? What are your customers, your employees saying underneath your social media? You know, what are people saying
in the comment
around,
section?
What are they saying around the water cooler? What are they saying in your annual survey?
Yeah.
Right. What are people saying?
How are they describing you?
How are they describing you?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you describe yourself and how are other people describing you? Which kind of.
And this is really interesting for me because sometimes this is really good. It's really positive. So I first met you working on a luxury car brand. And what people said that luxury car brand was very shiny, very glossy, very sleek, very efficient, very aspirational. Let me tell you, that was not what it was actually like.
Exactly.
So what people say about you is not your culture.
No.
It is an indication of your culture, and there are indications in there, and you will probably find there are tensions in there.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then it's what we say.
We are
and how, right? So we're talking about the formal indicators. So your brand positioning, your tone of voice, your EVP, the values on your wall, the behaviours that run alongside it. Okay, so the big what you say you are, right?
What's on the recruitment website?
Absolutely.
What you put on LinkedIn?
Yeah. And this is for me where I really begin to see this disconnect between what you espouse and what you actually are, right? But take a dip a little deeper, right? Let's look at your emails. How do people write your emails, right? Do you do political CCing? Are emails long? Are they short? Are they formal? Are they informal? You know, do you use them as your only source of communication, right? I mean, it's, you know, you see a lot of organisations who might have inclusive or we care as their value, right? But actually they only use email to communicate with their workforce, the majority of whom are deskless, right?
Yeah.
So you can start to see where these really interesting little pearls of disconnect begin to happen between what you formally say you are and actually what you are.
And I think that's really interesting. So we met an organisation recently for whom inclusivity was a huge part of their brand, their brand proposition, and something that they were very much selling to their customers. And a reason why I think lots of people joined the organisation. And I've got to say that sitting within the hallowed halls, and they were hallowed halls of that organisation, it didn't feel inclusive. There were all these unwritten ways of being and these very strict rules around what you could and couldn't do. Yeah. And almost the penalty of not conforming was so strong.
Yes.
It kind of, it sucked all the joy out of it, but B, it wasn't inclusive.
No.
So don't say that you're inclusive to your customers or you're in your marketing or even in your employer branding, if actually inside you're restricting the ways that people are allowed to show up and be.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting space that I think we sit in, is the espoused versus the reality. And it's how you go about looking for...
I want you to say it. What do we call it? We don't call it the espoused versus the reality. We call it
the say-do gap.
We call it the say-do gap.
We do call it the say-do gap. And, it's absolutely, I think, where the essence of our work lies and what the deep sea dive seeks to address is where are those gaps through the lenses that we've already talked about. Leadership is another great lens. The lens of leadership, okay? Walking the walk. Are you saying these are your values, but when the going gets tough, you kick them out? And we know the shadow for good or for bad that a leader can cast.
Yeah, I mean, back to the ecosystem, right? They're like a very big shark swimming across through the water, right? Or a seal, or that kind of turtle dude in
or like
Finding
a nice
Nemo.
whale if it's a nice
like the turtle in Finding Nemo was going to the drop pot. Do you remember that? No,
vaguely.
You've got kids. I know you do.
Yeah, I know.
I don't. I've got no excuse for having just done that. So leaders behaviour, what they do, what they look like.
Yeah.
So the thing about leaders is that they all look the same. That you're saying, you know, there's a couple of things there. First of all, there's no marine scientist in the world that will tell you that having lots and lots of parts of the ecosystem that are identical is healthy for the ecosystem. It's not.
You need diversity.
So you need diversity to thrive. And we've done a podcast on that previously. But leaders that all look the same and do the same, breed the same behaviours and outcomes, and then set a kind of standard for leadership that means that you only get the same. So you're fishing, see what I did there? Fishing from an increasingly small pool. But also, as you just say, their behaviour casts a real shadow or light over and it sets the tone. So it doesn't matter what you say you are and what you do if you've got leaders that are acting in opposition to that. And that's hard because nobody wants to tell the chief executive or the FD or the head of HR
that they've got a say
they're a knob.
Or that they're a knob,
You can't get fired for that now. Did you read that?
What?
Did you not read the press this week?
Can't get fired for calling
Can't get
boss
cold
a knob.
for calling your boss. What do they call? Dickhead, I think was what they called.
Okay.
So we're 2 for 2 on the swear words per episode in the new brand. Anyway, I'm not advocating calling your boss a knob, but to be serious for a millisecond, giving feedback to leaders and leaders being able to really listen to that, which leans in some of the things you said in previous podcasts about listening, giving feedback and self-reflection. If you haven't got that, you've got no way of closing that say-do gap.
No, exactly. And again, you know, if you think about it, if you've got a value of openness, for example, right, but your leader's door's always shut. Or they're inaccessible, or there's no psychological safety and you're not able to go and have any direct contact with them. These are the disconnects and these are the little subtleties that once you start to really fish around in your cultural ecosystem, these things start to become apparent.
Yeah, they do. And it takes a little bit of courage to do all of that. And we'll get onto that in a second. So we've got, you know, what you say you are, what other people say you are, and how your leaders behave.
And then we've of course got how you treat your people.
How you treat your people.
And this, I guess, sort of goes back to what the CIPD calls climate, with the shared experiences, the policies, the practices and procedures. You know, how you actually creating that employee experience. Does what you say in your people strategy have any congruence with actually what goes on, the lived experience of people that work within that organisation?
Yeah, although for me, our fifth bit, which I always think is a bit that nobody ever looks at, really does talk about what some of the CIPD talks about. But definitely how you treat your people is your formal people strategy, like the decisions you make around your policies. Like if you've got a value that says we care, but you've got a really crappy maternity policy or sickness policy, you don't care. You don't care. And people will see that loud and clear and they'll talk about it. On Glassdoor if you're really unlucky. So that's the say-do gap right there. And what you've got there is an employee relations team acting in tension with whoever it was that created the values, which might be the talent team or an OD team. And that happens so often. And it happens even more so when you're outside of the HR team and people are looking after ways of working that impact people. So should we touch on the fifth element? Because I think for me, this is the most interesting one. It's the least sexy. And when we get on to how to work with this, there's a reason why it doesn't get touched. But your ways of working are the stuff that actually the people and culture team don't always touch. So maybe it is your absence policy, your holiday booking, but it's just as likely to be your expenses, your IT systems and processes. If you've got a really clunky, convoluted system that takes you 7 different ways to log in, it takes like a spinning circle of death before you can get anywhere, and you've got a value that says you're agile, you're having a joke. You're having a joke at your employee's expense.
And I think that's where it gets really interesting, and it elevates it from simply thinking about, actually, we talk about culture as the values of the wall and the behaviours that are lived within the organisation. Can we measure those? Tick, tick, tick. Yeah, we've done it. It is so much deeper than that. And I think that's where it starts to get really interesting for people outside the people and culture team. It's when it starts to get really interesting for everyone in that C-suite, because suddenly it's the financial director's responsibility to make sure his team are operating in alignment with the kind of culture that you want to keep or develop or change or whatever you want to do. It then becomes every single person's responsibility. Culture is not gatekept and owned by a small department within an organisation.
We are all guardians of culture in an organisation. Every single person in an organisation is a guardian of culture. I can't state that enough in terms of it's our job to behave in congruence with it, to tend to it, to notice if it's not gone, going the way that we want it to do, to spot the say-do gaps, to moderate and reflect on their own behaviour, to think intentionally about the things that they're creating and the way that they're creating them within the organisation, because you are feeding that ecosystem every time.
Day.
Every time.
Every single day, every single interaction, every single communication, every single policy decision, everything that you do and say, the way you act, the decisions you make, all impact that ecosystem to a greater or lesser extent. And you know what happens when you don't tend, you get your little toxic spills.
Yeah.
And we know that a little toxic spill, if they're not identified and taken care of, can actually start to pollute the whole of your ecosystem. And there are so many well-documented examples out there in the press of where this has happened, and possibly could have not happened had leaders had more courage, employees had more courage to ask those hard questions, to lean in, to call people out, and to get on top of it before it pollutes.
Yeah, and compassion. This is why those two things are so core to kind of our values when we do this culture work, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to notice this stuff with compassion and not with judgment. Yes. If you're going around going, that's toxic, you're toxic, he's toxic, that's crap, this is a say-do gap. We say it for shorthand and because it's nice, it's memorable. But when you're actually having these conversations internally, in an organisation,
your language matters.
I've noticed that, we care is a really important value to us. We tell everybody that that's core to us. And yet we're doing this thing over here and it doesn't feel very caring. And being able to listen to that, we've got another podcast. I love referencing the archive. We've got another podcast on the art of feedback and listening to feedback. As a leader, being able to listen to feedback is a cornerstone of cultural work. Because time and time again, we see leaders look at feedback from employees or from surveys or from customers even, and they respond quite defensively. And you can't do that if you want to take a deep sea dive and do work on culture, right?
Exactly. That's our model for how we try to demystify the enormously nebulous topic and actually allow people to kind of have a bit of measurement. And kind of secondary to that, and something that I know we love to do when we're working with clients, because it just stops it from being scary and gives everyone an opportunity of where to start, is trying to plot some of these activities against the effort impact matrix.
I need a sexier name for that matrix. We need to rebrand the matrix.
We'll rebrand the matrix.
I think this is a pitfall that lots and lots of organisations fall into. I think we need to do something about our culture. You see it often when a new chief exec comes in fact, and they think, there needs to be a culture change around here. I need to shake things up a little bit. I know what I'll do.
They start in the wrong place.
I'll rebrand, or I'll put some new, I'll get some new values, and we'll put some new values on the wall. And values are a good cornerstone of culture, and a brand is a good cornerstone of culture.
And if there's a genuine need to refresh your strategy, then maybe your values need to get looked at.
And that might be true.
And that might be true.
That might be true.
But that's not the immediate answer if it's genuinely not the required remedy.
Correct. And if your values actually are solid and they stand true and they align to your brand,
then don't come in with a vanity project, right, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, and decide that you're going to rip them up and put some new ones in because you like the way they sound better. That's what we mean by that.
And it's not just CEOs that do that. And we're talking really about on the effort impact matrix. Let's just explain the matrix. We're talking about stuff that is either high effort or low effort, and high impact or low impact. High effort, low impact is what I call a vanity project. It's something that we think we should do, maybe because it might win an award, maybe because it's a little bit sexy, like we're doing something with some VR or AI or...
Let's spend £100,000 creating a virtual reality experience to bring our values to life, for example. Fun, but is it actually going to get you to where you need to get to, or is that...
Are people really going to be able to practice living those behaviours day in, day out? Are they able to live those behaviours?
Because they've seen it through a headset. I mean, the answer's no, right?
No. They had a fun half hour. Talking about values.
That's a really good way of articulating what we mean by vanity.
It's a great vanity project, and one that actually we've seen recently happen. It's very marketing led, that, how can we sell our values to people? You don't sell values, you bring them to life through a framework of behaviours that are talked about, refined, localised in the fabric of how we do things, continually referenced and checked against. And so something like that. And also, coming in and putting in a new performance management system might be a vanity project if the issue is really that we're not having good quality conversations, right? So you need to get to the nub of what's the thing that's going to have the biggest impact of all the interventions and all of our say-do gaps or alignment that we want to have, or evolving or amplifying our culture. What's the thing that's going to have the biggest impact? And of those things, which are the ones that take the lowest effort, because that's where we start, is the low effort, high impact, because those are the things that prove that you're shifting the needle, that build the momentum, that help people feel like, oh, right, they really are doing something about it, versus, well, they did a values, refresh 3 years ago and you're still an asshole, Are we going to say that word in every podcast?
Only if I can say asshole.
Excellent. Good. So I'm just going to move on.
You said it.
I know.
Again.
But the point being that you start with where you can have some tangible impact. And I'll give a real example. I was talking to the Chief People Officer from Norton Rose, a really brilliant lady called Kate, in the Speakers Lounge at this conference a few months ago. And she said they had noticed a say-do gap in their organisation. Yeah. They've got a value of equality and fairness, but they weren't recognising in town halls, they weren't shouting out about everyone's promotions. They were just shouting about people who've been made partner. They clocked they'd been doing that, no judgment. They're just going, oh, okay, we can make a calibration there. And they started shouting out everyone. Really low effort, high impact, very visible. And it did have an impact. People noticed it, and it shifted the needle on that equality and inclusion
and I
value.
think, so what we're not saying is don't ever not do the high effort, high impact stuff, right?
Do it, but plan for it.
But plan for it. And if you want to start somewhere, once you've looked at your culture and climate through the lens of the ecosystem, pick up some of those quick wins that you can have some tangible impact, visible tangible impact as well, so people can actually see that something's changing.
Yeah.
And start to work on those first.
Yeah, and be honest about impact, right? Be honest about impact, not impact in the people and culture team. Yeah. Or impact because it's something the FD or the chief exec really like. Impact because the people on the ground will feel it.
Exactly.
They'll feel something different.
Yeah.
They won't always feel something different from the big, expensive projects unless they're really well planned and delivered.
Yeah, I think so. Great. Okay, so I think we're probably about ready to wrap. And, it's a big topic, and it's one that obviously is central to what we do at the Seven Seas, and one that we could talk about for a long time. But I think that gives everyone a bit of a sense of what we mean when we talk about going for a deep sea dive, and what the cultural ecosystem looks like, the components it's made of, and how you can start to kind of look at culture and climate through the lens of this impact effort matrix to start identifying some of the small, significant, visible, tangible, impactful changes that you might be able to make.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Fantastic.
On that note, we don't have a good close yet. We need to work on it.
Why are we not saying see you later?
Alligator. That's it. You've nailed it.
Who used to do that? There was a see you like that. You know what it was? This is Glee. You will never have watched Glee in your whole entire life.
Used to.
Did you used to watch Glee?
Mic drop, yeah.
Do you remember Sue?
No.
And that's how Sue sees it. Do you remember that?
Sue sees
That's how Sue sees it. And that, folks, is how we see it.
That will never happen again, by the way. That was a one and done.
That's it. We're done. Cue credits.
Yeah.